Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back into the Buster Show. We have a very special guest today, and that is because we have the incredible Mickie James on the show. What's going on?
Oh, not much. How are you?
Doing fantastic. We were
Yeah.
just talking about right before we came on one of your new songs, and I have to ask. We'll get into the wrestling stuff and all of that, but
Okay.
where did your inspiration to become an artist come from, or was that something that you always wanted to do?
It was something that I always wanted to do, but I just didn't think I was any good at. I think that I was a bit deterred away from like singing at a younger age because I was one, I only sang in like the church choir or in the bathroom or, down at the farm while I was cleaning up the stalls and stuff like that. So it was just one of those things. And I remember this moment of being like, I think it was and I'll date myself here. I was like recording myself to Whitney Houston's I Will Always Love You. So I was like playing
Wow.
it on the A side and recording myself on the B side. And I probably had sang this song maybe 10, 15 times in a row before my stepdad came in and was like, please, for the love of God, stop singing. And I think that I was like, oh, but he was,
Dang,
I
that's
can't,
brutal. Yeah.
brutal. No, but legit. And I go like, I didn't think I could be a singer. I just didn't think it was good at it. But I was always writing and I was always writing in lyrical form, right? Like I've always written kind of in that. And I've written other stuff, poetry and all that other stuff. I played the violin for years, from I think 5th grade all the way up till about 10th grade. And then I real like I was trying to be cool. And so I kind of fell out of it, going like, oh, I can't play the violin and be cool
I
at the
think the
same.
violin is super cool.
Super cool. I was an idiot.
Yeah.
Why did I put it down? Like, if you're listening out there and you have something that you're kind of talented at and you love to do it, who cares what everybody else thinks? We're all nerds. Totally fine. It's
True.
cool to be a nerd these days,
It's so funny how that happened, even from
right?
when I was younger too. But I feel like that's just the older you get, the cooler you think that people who are more nerdy are, because
Right.
all nerdy means is passionate about something,
Right.
right?
Totally. And
So
I'm a super nerd if that's the case. But I do remember on the bus one day when I was still riding the bus, obviously, um, being tripped up and almost I took a bump on my violin case in the hallway being tripped because I was a nerd.
mm,
Just look back.
that's that's tough.
These are
Yeah. The only
yeah,
problem with instruments in school is that you had to lug them around everywhere. Like,
right. And I don't know why I didn't think about it at the time because you would think like it would have served as the perfect weapon if I wanted to defend myself. And I never once
yeah,
used it. I mean, I had a bow, I had a fiddle, I had a case. It shuts. There's been I could have
yeah,
had a whole match with just the violin in its case,
it's
with
true.
my opponent.
And speaking of matches, like when you were growing up, did you did you ever think that you were going to do what you ended up doing, or like was that even a thing, or how did
Yeah.
that come to fruition?
It's kind of crazy, but I was a wrestling fan. I was a wrestling fan as a child. I watched wrestling with my dad. That was kind of like our bonding
Who were the
thing.
stars when you were watching? Like, who were
Oh
the
God, I
biggest
mean, we're
names?
talking like Georgia Championship Wrestling. We're talking like old school, old school. It's like
Okay,
Saturday mornings, or it was different. Savage was my all-time favorite.
got it,
He was my all-time, and I know he
got
was
it.
a bad guy most of the time, but he was my all-time favorite. Flair. I always gravitated towards the heel. I like the bad guys. I think it's because they could talk all the talk and they were cool. Like they were edgy and they were different and they didn't play by everybody's rules and they
Right.
still, you know what I mean? Like I loved all like the personas is really what I kind of gravitated to the most. And looking back, I love all the good guys now, Ricky Steamboat, even Hogan, like, but I hated Hogan as a kid. Like I was
Interesting.
like, I don't get this guy. Everybody loves this guy. Like I love
Yeah.
Randy Savage. Like he's not as cool as Savage. That was me. It was yeah, so it's just funny. But so I've kind of, obviously loved it as a kid. I fell away from it as I was working with my horses and competing like every summer with my horses and I had the violin and stuff like that. And then boys happened, and so all of these things. And then I get out of high school and I don't really have a lot of direction. And I'm kind of like, okay, what am I going to do with my life now? Like as an adult. And I was just kind of, wrestling found me. Like I found wrestling and
Interesting.
wrestling found me. And it was a very hot era of wrestling at that time. It was that attitude era. It was Stone Cold. It was The Rock. And it reminded me like, oh, this is why I love wrestling. Like this was because I hadn't watched, in a space. And I think I started watching again about 96 or so, towards, my last years of high school or whatever. And it just fell in love all over again. And it just goes like, these guys are so cool. They're not like, except for Stone Cold, remind me of my great crazy uncle. And like, but most of them is just like, these guys are just so, so cool. I just didn't think there was a way to do it because I honestly thought it was like a circus, like they found these monsters, these crazy over the top, larger
Yeah,
than life
that's what I
characters.
always thought too.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
had no idea. And I'm like, okay, but and so then my friend approached me. He's like, hey, my buddy has a school up near DC. It's a wrestling school because he knew how much I loved it. He'd see me like locked in. And
Right.
yeah, and I was like, what? And I went up to the school one day. It was like 2 hours for me from Richmond to DC, depending on the traffic. It could be 2 to 7 hours. But I
Yep.
went up to the school one day and I went that day and was like, and it wasn't even that great of a school. It was like a wrestling school in the back of like a taekwondo dojo sort of thing, boxing. I learned to wrestle in a boxing ring. So that was my first introduction into wrestling as far as behind the scenes, learning the ropes and stuff like that. And yeah, I went there that day. It was like November 98. I signed up that day, paid my tuition, and started training. And then I had my first match in March 99, March 3rd or something, 99. It was a tag match.
Wow.
It was an intergender tag match. It was myself and Jake Damian against American Mike Brown and Candy. That was
It's
my
pretty
first match.
crazy to think that you can go from having no direction to wrestling in front of, 50,000 people just like
Yeah,
that.
it's crazy. Well, but those first couple years though, I mean, I wrestled in Fayetteville, North Carolina at a car lot with four people and it was like 104
Oh, so
degrees.
you were born to do this.
I was wrestling and like people with like in the armory with
Right.
20 people, in Stanton, Virginia. Those are the shows that we were doing while we were trying to get, until I finally just kept leveling up. And I say it's a lot like the music industry. So it's kind of ironic that these are my two loves and my two
Mhm.
passions, horses and obviously my son, but um that because they run so parallel in the sense that you kind of have to do all the crappy things all to like work yourself up to get seen just by that one person that one time in front of the right crowd and just that one song, that one just moment, and then everything, your whole life can change, and it's a really cool thing. And it took a while to get there for me, but I'm also really grateful it took, like I had the path that I did. Like I feel like for me I took the right way. It wasn't like a hot shot thing or I just got it out of nowhere or I was plucked from a magazine or anything like that. Like I
Yeah.
genuinely love the business and I genuinely wanted to change the business and be one of the best. So
No, that's
yeah,
definitely the best way to do it too. It's the most authentic,
for sure.
which is always better. Now, for something like that, and you said you just naturally wrestled people randomly in random places, but you have to have a ton of confidence to, because the thing about like that form of wrestling is it's both sport and competition.
Right.
So it's like NBA players aren't thinking about entertaining people when
No,
they're
they're
playing,
thinking about the game.
thinking about the game. That's all they're paid to think about. If
Right.
any NBA player didn't want to talk, they don't have to talk.
No.
Like it's not the same in you know uh the most watched forms of wrestling, right? So
Right.
you have to be so confident to be able to do both of those. Were you always that confident in, being able to go out there and do this in front of so many people, or how
No.
did you get that?
I think that I probably gained my most confidence when I was in OVW. That's probably when I really gained. because when you say confidence, you have to think of it like this. And I go, like, when I'm out there as Mickie James, the wrestler, that's an extension of myself. I'm not Mickie James, who I'm fortunate enough to be able to have my own name because I have a pretty cool real name. But,
Cool.
there's a lot of people, whereas it's, the person you meet backstage is nothing like the character that you see on television. Like that character exudes confidence. It's like a person. And I think for me, when I first got into wrestling, because I aspired to have that type of confidence on a real level, but I didn't have it on a real level. But that character had it. And so it was just, that was a way for me to start to open up and grab that confidence. But it was through the eyes of a character, not Mickie James. You know what I mean? So
Right.
learning, like, to build up to that level of confidence where I myself have the same confidence in me as I did in that character, that's a whole nother. I mean, I don't even think we have long enough on this call to even talk about how we got there.
Right.
But you know what I mean? That's just life journey stuff. But I wanted to have that type of confidence. I think that I was already athletic because sports and between I was a endurance rider. Like, I showed my whole life with horses. I started riding when I was 4 and I competed. So I was already a competitive person. I didn't like to lose. I'm already a perfectionist. I don't like to not succeed or not be the best, or I at least my best,
Right.
Um but the thing about wrestling that makes it different from a lot of things, including acting or whatever, is like you get one take. You don't There's no multiple takes, especially if it's live television. You have to stand and deliver every single night that you're out there. There are no seasons off, there's no days off, there's no, you don't get to break for weddings and holidays and funerals and all these things. Like, I miss so many moments because of my passion for the business. But you also can't let those things come in and affect your character on television, because you have to separate those things. But still, authenticity, especially in today's market and today's society, is so, like, people love off they're so sick of fake reality, right? Like, they
Which
want.
is most of everything. Yeah.
But if you watch it even in television, it's just like, it's slowly kind of filtering out because people are watching less and less of that because they're over it. Like, they want authenticity, they want real people and real stories and real emotion. And I think for wrestling too, that was a way for me to tap into, because I always say songs for me, if they can grab at my heart or take me to a moment or take me to a thought of like a memory or anything like that, that's what really connects me with music. And that's what's always connected me with wrestling, is the emotion, is being able to pull on
Right.
people's heartstrings and make them feel something. And that's how you kind of know that you're doing the art right.
Totally. Now it's kind of funny too when I think about it. Like it's an interesting time because, there are things that are happening in sort of like mixed martial arts world, like YouTubers against the greatest fighters of all time. But I feel like, in the same way that YouTube is now a catapulter for, you know, anybody to become famous, to then take that next step to movies and making music and doing that. That's what WWE and other wrestling organizations were way before YouTube.
Right.
Like you have people like The Rock and John C, like all these people who, did it without social media, but
Right.
you leveraged this sport platform from an entertainment standpoint to be able to do that. Is that something that you thought about when you were first getting into it? That, there was like, the next, or that you saw, like, I'm sure as you were doing it, you saw The Rock become The Rock, like
For
probably the biggest
sure.
star in the world.
Yeah, that's crazy to see. Like, it's a pretty amazing, but it also goes a lot to just him as a person, and you can see how much drive he has. And hey, he's so ambitious and smart. Um, I think that we could all aspire to be in that type of leveling up, sort of marquee, whether, but however, I think the beautiful thing about, and wrestling was always been kind of ahead of the curve on a lot of these things. However, today, with all these platforms, to be able to, it kind of gives the power back to the performer in a sense, because that was never a thing, and within wrestling as well, because I think even when I was coming up, there wasn't a platform for me to grow. In fact, it was like I kind of grown to a level where I had enough like steam behind me on the like little underground circuit where people are going like, who's this chick? Who's this chick? To where I got signed. But then at that moment, we got tucked away kind of in developmental. So we could learn and get better and fine tune and perfect all these little things in a safe space before we were brought to television. So we were never overexposed before we were ready. And now it's like people are getting all that happening on television, right? So they're like, some of them are learning on television, which is a blessing and a curse for some people. I mean, some people get reality television shows out of it, where the other people don't really ever get taken seriously as a performer because they got brought up too early. But then there's other people who have been starving on the independent scene and who've been hungry and wanting, and it just kept going, 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 and they just shoot right for the stars as soon as they come on the scene and just kind of excel above everybody else. So there's it's different levels, and that's why I say, for me, I know I did it the right way by going like grassroots sort of way and learning, so that way by the time I got to TV I was over prepared, and I think that's why I excelled so quickly once I made it to television. It's just that journey to get into television was a little longer for me than, you know, a lot of people at that time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Now, I have a question, and I'm not sure how much you can say, but um, how much is off the cuff when you're doing when you're out there in front of a big crowd on live national TV? How much is, you know,
I will say, and I don't want, if this is a business here, I will say, I think that, there's been enough documentaries and stuff like that. And even Vince has came back and said, we're not trying to pull the wool over everybody's eyes. Obviously, we are sports, we are entertainment, we are theater, we are all these things. There are many things that happen off the cuff. There's many stories that change on live television based on the fans reaction. Like, there could be something that happens and there's something in mind for this one thing, but the people completely go a different way, and you go like, oh, and sometimes you don't even realize the magic you have in front of you because the people will often tell you that. And so there could be plans that have been like, okay, this is what we're doing here to wherever, and then they
right?
go out there and then something, a spark, a yes movement, something happens to where it just changes the game, and that's really a cool factor. But obviously with injuries things have to change, and that's, you know I think we get to a space, and it depends on who you're working with, like, where you can go out there. If I'm comfortable with someone, I don't really necessarily have to talk about anything, you know? But then there's other people who are very new, and you have to make sure that they're safe and come, because the last thing we don't want anyone to get hurt, right? Because we still have to drive 200 miles to the next town the next night, which obviously is not what we're doing right now because of COVID and all that stuff. But we still have to drive to the next town next night. We still have to go out and put a show on for those people. And you don't want to do something stupid or whatever that gets somebody injured, out of nowhere. So unless there's genuine friction between people, which they just don't like each other, and it just
And that
happens.
happens.
Sometimes that happens too. So you just never know.
Huh. Now, do you have any favorite moments looking back? Like that night was better than the other nights, that sort of thing, when you just look back on it all.
Oh yeah. I mean, I have so many. I have so many. I always say that probably my biggest growing experience into like really what defined me and helped me break away like as a performer was my OVW experience of like leaving home for the first time, having to move to Louisville on my own. Like, I'd left home, but I'd never been further than 30 minutes from my mom and my dad. You know what I mean? I was still close enough to be able to go for dinner and help with my clothes or whatever it is. So that was a huge thing for me. But like wrestling career wise, I would say obviously my first WrestleMania match against Trish Stratus, that will always there's nothing like the first one. You know, that will always be a moment for me that I'll always, I think the fan reaction, the momentum going into it, the all of the things of that culmination of my dreams coming true. That's what that was. And that moment of realization that I finally made it. Like, I legit, this
Right.
is this
That's
is
the
it.
made
This
it
is how you
moment.
know.
Right.
Right. That moment, the chance, the opportunity to work with Lita on her way out, and that kind of passing the torch moment. That was a huge moment. Also because Lita had had such, like, she had helped me so much through my career that people don't even realize before I'd even gotten a contract, like while I was still on the indie scene, like just helping me whenever I was through the area and watching my matches and all these things that people don't always take the time to do, and she was gracious enough to do that for me. Um, then there's a match with Beth Phoenix in Alaska. I believe it was Fairbanks, Alaska. Uh, that we had, and it was a non-televised match. It was probably one of my greatest matches of my whole career, like top to bottom. I wish it was on television. I wish somebody had filmed it. It was just magic, and she and I were one of those people that just had magic out there. Like we could just go out there and just be. We just knew each other so well, and we just could feel each other's body language, and it was just amazing. And probably one of my favorite matches of all time, and nobody will ever see it but we got a standing ovation when we came back through the curtain, and this was pre women getting standing ovations, you know what I mean?
Really?
This is pre women getting like a locker room clap, and not just a golf clap, but like Flair and Triple H and Cena and Arn Anderson and the whole locker room standing on their feet clapping. Like I legit get tears when I think about it, because I still to this day haven't had that. That was the one, probably the only time that that's truly happened for me, and
Wow.
yeah,
That's
it
so
was a
cool.
pretty special moment. Yeah, and then I think coming back, the cage match against Tara in Impact Wrestling, that was my first huge cage match and diving off the top of the cage. But I think for me, leaving WWE the first time and being able to reinvent and redefine myself, that was perhaps a little bit more in line with who I was then. That was really cool, and to still stay relevant in the people's eyes, because a lot of people, once they leave WWE, you don't hear from them again. So yeah, and then Asuka and Takeover. That was probably, since my last. That was probably my favorite match from my whole comeback of everything I did in the
That's
last.
awesome. You gave
Yeah,
you gave me even more than I asked for. It was like a top 10.
you're welcome. I like to.
Thank you. Uh, something you mentioned earlier too, that social media sort of does democratize the power, where especially back then, like you said, somebody wasn't on TV, there was nowhere else for them to be.
Right,
Whereas now it's like, oh, you're not on TV, but you have a million followers. It's like, all right.
right.
So,
Well, I think it just gives the power back to the performer and the artist to kind of really define their audience and market to their audience. And that's the beautiful thing, is like, there could be somebody who uh you would have never thought to have given a chance, but because there's such an uproar from their social media platforms, or there's a true desire and they have a following, because at the end of the day, it is business, isn't it? It's called the wrestling business. So it is business, and so if they have that kind of marketing and people actually genuinely care about them. And the thing is there's so many different interests. There's gaming, there's sports, there's ballet, there's all these things that people are into that have a huge audience, and a
right.
huge
It's a
audience
big
for that one
crossover.
thing.
Yeah,
Right, like I'm not a huge gamer. I will play, but again, I hate to lose, so I don't play very long. But you know what I mean? It's like it's just whatever your passion is. And I think that, we all have different gifts and talents and stuff too. And like there's a way to truly showcase that now, because people will watch, if because a lot of people are into the same things, and now we have a way to reach them. Whereas before we never had a way to get to them, or you just had to hope for that right person to see it.
totally. And that allows everybody to expand their brand. Like, even yourself as an example here, like being able to venture into music, right? And just pulling the entire audience that watched you with you.
Right.
Like that's something that was never doable before. Now another question: if you could collaborate with any artist in the world, who would it be?
Any artist in the world right now today?
To do a song
Dolly
together with?
Parton. That would be Dolly Parton, Miss Dolly Parton,
Really?
forever and always, yes. And then it would have to be Reba McEntire. And then Garth Brooks, maybe. And then ooh, who else? I don't know. Yes, it has to be alive, obviously. Because before, I mean, Madonna. Oh my God, Madonna.
That would be pretty cool.
Whoa, dope.
Should
That
reach
would.
out.
Yeah, you think she'll pick up my phone call?
Why not?
For sure.
If
If she's
if
listening, it's
if
8:04.
if I've learned anything from doing this podcast, that's everybody's more reachable than you think they are by like a multitude of 100.
Right. Well, you think back and when I was growing up, like this whole thing, this was never a thing, right? Like you would never see, oh, where Jennifer Aniston was eating lunch yesterday. Nobody would
Yeah, I
ever know.
don't, I don't, I don't want to know
I
that. It
I
feels too
don't know.
intrusive.
I'm not that creepy. I don't know that, but there are people who like, and these are the things that end up in magazines, and I'm just like, I don't know, or like on the Twitter feeds and stuff like that. And I go, like, everyone is so touchable, which almost like gives this false sense, of um familiarization in a sense. Like you almost feel like you know them more than you know them, or like, hey, we're like best friends. It's like, no, I
Right.
followed them on Instagram and I heard a
Yeah.
few of their things. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
like everybody's way more touchable than they used to be, which makes it seems like fame is just a little bit easier to obtain than it used to be, because there's so much.
Yeah. It's
So
definitely
many.
easier. It's definitely easier to obtain, but also like looking back when I think about like the people who I consider the greats, it was all pre-social media people. It's like I think of like Michael Jordan. Mike
Right.
was never on any of this, nor will he
No,
ever be. And that
did do Space Jam.
that separation, right? Of like, I don't know what is going on. And there are documentaries like there are for
Oh, for
everything.
sure.
There was a big one last year around Michael in
Oh, I know, we
particular,
saw it.
but it was great, The Last Dance.
So good.
Um,
So good. It was crazy. I learned stuff that I had no idea. And that's
same.
the one thing. But I feel like that's why those are so watched, though, is because people don't know.
The
Whereas now
mystique
everyone,
is what drives like that excitement about random
stardom.
people. Like Babe Ruth, I don't know anything about Babe Ruth, and that's why he's like a superhero. Or like some of these
No,
old presidents, like Lincoln and Washington. Like there aren't videos, there aren't really many photos of these people, and that's why they're so
that's why
looked
they're
at
so like
in a
put in
particular
high
way.
regard, though, is because
Right.
they are untouchable. And that's why they can put a movie out and it'll be a box sell, like it'll be a box office sellout, because there is a difference in that type of level stardom, because they weren't so touchable, and like it wasn't so easy to get to, so now it makes it special.
Yeah, and when you think about those sorts of people now, there really aren't that many. Like,
No, no, because everybody's on social media tweeting pictures
yeah,
of their coffee cups.
it's like even like the people
I do.
who like, yeah, I should do
Yeah.
that.
Just, woo, this is the cappuccino.
No, it's funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, even when I think about like the biggest stars in today's age, like, let's use music as an example, like somebody like Drake.
Right.
He's pretty private, but
Yeah.
much more public than, Frank Sinatra was.
No doubt. No doubt.
you
And
know?
you think, what would they think of this level of, because obviously everyone's capitalizing on it because it is such a valuable asset and it's a tool, and so obviously you have to kind of stay up on the trends in order to keep a little bit. But I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of I'm a private person too, so a lot of it's like I try to not overexpose on my, because I've just come from the country and I've always felt that way. But then there is this like like FOMO almost, in the sense that you feel the need, you almost feel obligated to make sure that you're still staying up on stuff. So it's like a catch 22, isn't it? I wonder what they would think.
I'm
Like I
sure
feel like,
I'm sure that they would be the same
yeah,
if they grew up in it.
right,
But only
right,
if they grew up in it, because like
yeah,
the Jordans of the world still aren't on social, so obviously like some things never change, but if they grew up in it, it's impossible not to. It's
yeah.
impossible. You cannot be a kid today, or at most any age, and not be on social.
Well, you can't be, especially if you're someone trying to break out and break
Oh
through.
yeah.
You can't do it without a social media presence and a platform. and somewhere for people to put their eyes on you and see you, because that's the only way people aren't going to concerts like they used to, or they aren't going to these events, especially now. But that way they're going to see you is on the computer or on, television.
Right. Just
Yeah.
imagine like George Washington tweeting that he just signed, or that, they just got
I can't.
big declarations passed. It'd be pretty
Right.
cool.
That would be cool.
Pretty cool. But
We
I'm
just
sure
tweeted about it.
the thing about all of it though is you just get so desensitized to it all very quickly. So like it only works until it happens. And then after, it's normal. It doesn't work
Right.
anymore.
Yeah.
There was something you said earlier that I wrote down that I really liked. You said you don't want to be overexposed before you're ready. Is that something that you thought about often, particularly when you were younger, or was it more like the company knew that and then you learned it?
No, I think it was something that was told to me because I was in OVW for I was supposed to be there for 6 months, you know? And at that time, I thought I was ready for television when I first got signed. I was like, I feel like I'm ready because I was good. I was probably one of the best girl. And granted, this is a different time. Women weren't training to be wrestlers at that time. Like it was only a handful of really great female wrestling talent. There was a lot of managers and girlfriends and stuff like that, not a whole lot of female wrestlers, right? So in my opinion at the time, I'm like, I'm ready. Like I've been at this for 5 years. Like I'm good. Like I know I'm good. I've like went to camps. I did Dory Funk Dojo. I did Ricky Steamboat Dojo. I did an ECW dojo. I've been training for 5 years, working the indies, clawing my way up. I just felt like I was ready. And but I wasn't ready, because working on television is a way different thing than working for the people, just for the house, for an arena, So, and I thought I was ready, but there was so fine tuning is what I needed, and
Right.
my trainer there, he goes, I want you to be over prepared. I can't let you go up there with his name on it. I don't want you to go up there and not be ready. I don't want you to be overexposed before you're ready. Because I'm sitting here going like, why won't they call me up? Damn, like I was only supposed to be here for 6 months. It's been 8 months now. It's been a year now. It's a year and a half. Like what is going on? Oh, what do you mean I'm not ready? But they got all these girls going up because it was Diva Search. They got all these girls going up. I'm teaching them how to grab a headlock. They don't know what they're doing. And they're going, he goes, it's not going to work. They're like, that's not going to work. He's like, just you keep grinding and running your own race, keep doing your own thing. And I promise you, the cream of the crop always rises to the top. I promise you, when you go up, you're just going to blow the doors off the place and people aren't going to know what to do. And I say that and I'm so grateful that he said that to me, but I was so irritated. And
Right.
because
I
I'm hungry,
imagine.
I was pissed. I'm like, seriously, this is bullshit, like, sorry, pardon my language. I apologize. You can bleep
No,
it.
you're good. This isn't on a network. I own it all. So
Okay.
you can say whatever you want.
You go for it. You own it all. Um, I, but I was like, I was getting so frustrated. And he's like, just trust me, just trust me, just trust me. It's gonna happen. You just have, when it happens, you're gonna be over prepared. I want you to be over prepared. And so it just resonated with me. And I think that honestly, had I gone up, like I would have still done well, but I would have been making all these little tiny mistakes that I
Right.
didn't make there on after. As far as now, life mistakes, made a whole lot of those, but in
Everybody
ring
does.
mistakes,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's amazing. Yeah,
yeah.
I have to imagine too, just because like even whenever I do a lot of play-by-play broadcasting for
Mhm.
basketball, and even when I'm like under a light for 3+ hours, like I'm drained at the end. I can't even
Right.
imagine what it's like being on a stage under the lights, also in front of a crowd, also moving because I'm sitting down stationary.
Well, and I'll say this because I've dabbled in commentary, and it is one of the hardest things. It was for me, and I go because I had never watched any type of sports from that perspective. I've only watched wrestling from a wrestler's mind, right? Like I
Right.
never watched it aside from when I was a fangirl. And obviously, it's not cool to be a fan when you're trying to be in the business. So you had to stop being a fan and you had to be a businesswoman, right? So I had to stop watching wrestling like a fan and watch it to study it, so I knew what, you know what I mean, study it, the ins and outs and all these. So then I had to almost like as a commentary, you also have to sit back and watch it from the fans' eyes, but also from the analyst eyes. And that was a real difficult task for me. It's like because your brain has, you have to be so quick, you have to talk in sound bites, you have to know when to wrap it up because there's wild, like there's so many moving parts. There's people in your ear, there's all these things happening. My brain didn't know what to do.
Yeah, there's a lot of multitasking that goes on.
Yes, and I'm used to multitasking. I'm a mom. That's all I do is multitask all day. But for
Right.
whatever, I'm sitting there going like, yeah, like I'm talking to the people in my headset. It was a hot mess. Like it took a while to get it into like where I started to really feel my groove.
Right.
That was also one of those things that I go like, I don't think I was ready to go out there and commentate on television as a real commentator. Like I think I needed to find my, I wasn't over prepared. I was, and that wasn't on anybody but me. Like I think that I just wish that if I had known like that was a vein and that was a real thing that I was going to look into going after, that I'd really dove in and studied it. But I don't think it was, I don't know. It's hard.
That's sort of like the general, I'd imagine, blessing and curse of being famous is that no matter what you do, you're automatically exposed to everybody. Like when you're just learning new things, like you could
Yeah.
be, if LeBron decided to play the cello tomorrow, everybody's going to judge him as if he's
Right.
LeBron, not as if he's the beginning cello player.
Right. Right. It's like, oh, you should just automatically be awesome at it. Like, no,
Right.
this
Right.
isn't,
It doesn't work
I'm
like
a
that.
brand new pair of shoes
Right.
here. I don't know how to walk in these things. Like, right.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
So last question for you. What are you most excited about now? Are you most excited about the music? Are you most excited about future wrestling? What excites you the most?
Um, ooh, I'm excited about my freedom.
That's
I'm
great.
excited about the freedom to be able to make my own decisions, to be able to do what I want to do. I think that, I think that I had all these expectations, and that's a problem. You can't have expectations because people will never live up to them. But I had all these wants and these expectations, but it was always, at the hands of somebody else. You know what I mean? Like it really, so it's, I'm just grateful to have my power back to kind of control my destiny and to like really kind of do what I want and do what makes me happy and do, be able to hang out with my son and watch him grow up and be awesome because he's so much cooler than me. And I just, it's going to be awesome. I'm excited about that. I'm
Very
excited
cool.
about doing the music. I've been working on all my music, but this new song, like, it couldn't have come out at a better time. Like, we couldn't have launched it at a better time. I think it's a
Yeah.
perfect statement for everything that's going on in my life right now. And the one thing that I'm most excited about is this Empower pay-per-view at Chase
I
at
was
Chase
reading
Ball-
about that.
at
Yeah.
Chase Ballroom, that we're coming back like NWA. We just announced I'm partnering with Billy Corgan from the Smashing Pumpkins, but he's also the owner and the president of the NWA. And so I had sat down and had a really cool conversation with him about this women's brand. It's been something that I wanted to do and wanted to do for the girls, all the girls, and not just me. I wanted all of us to be able to do it, Um, and I'm finally being able to allow the freedom to be able to bring that and the faith to bring that to fruition, and I think that's a really cool thing. And it's just crazy to me. It's ironic that it took a person. I'm so passionate about wrestling and music, but wrestling is obviously be the thing that people know me from. And then here, Billy Corrigan, who is also passionate about wrestling,
It's opposites, right?
but music is obviously, the thing that people know him from.
Perfect match.
That we've kind of, it's weird, right? And we've been friends for 20 years. So it's like crazy. It's crazy to see this kind of how it's all kind of played out. And yeah, he's putting faith in me and trust in me to put this all women's first ever NWA all women's pay-per-view together. And NWA is the oldest, most prestigious one of, dates back, WWF days, like, so it's like old territory days, and everyone has held those championships. And so it's just cool. It's cool. It's a cool piece of business. And so I'm going to do my best to put on one of the best, greatest all female pay-per-views you've ever seen.
That's
And
amazing. So when is that? Where can people
um,
watch that?
it's going to be on live on Fight TV. Um, and it's the full weekend. So it's August 28th is the Empower pay-per-view, all women's pay-per-view. August 29th is NWA 73, the anniversary show, which is going to be the biggest show of the year for NWA. And it's all from the historic Chase Ballroom in St. Louis, Missouri. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be so, so amazing. And if you got nothing to do, you got to come.
If I can, I will. That's super exciting. Congrats on all that.
Not putting you on the spot, but I did.
If I can, I'll be there.
Yeah, no,
That's
it's going to be great. It's going to be great. No, I'm so excited.
that's super cool. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I'm gonna link all your socials below as well so people can
You're
find you
amazing.
there and keep
Thank
in
you.
touch. And yeah, we'll have to do this again someday.
I can't wait. Yeah. We'll have to do it again coming up into the pay-per-view once I announce some awesome matches.
Awesome. All right, everybody. We'll
All
see you
right.
next time. Peace.